So hello again, everybody. Greetings to you all, and welcome to this second session of the geometry on the geometry of reality. As let us remember, it is in homage to Keith Critchlow, a key figure on the studies of geometry, and to my beloved Michel Chodkiewicz, whom I miss very much, because a part of his enormous contribution to the Akbarian studies, he was always available for questions of all people around him. So in their memory. And first I have to say that this talk is meant to be a continuation of the previous one, as Steve Histenstein was already mentioning. This is part of the work we are doing at the moment together, which aims to produce a book especially on the study of this blessing prayer of effusion, but in general, it will provide a study in many texts by Ibn Arabi and Bosnabi, among others. So let's keep in mind what we saw with Steve. He was really offering a most wonderful presentation, I thought, about the symbol of the circle and the central dot, and the idea of the compass standing up on the central dot, and so describing this endless circumference, which come to represent, as you know, the circle of existence. Well, you can see in my back, behind me, you see this Kufic writing of the well-known Ayat al-Kursi, the verse on light, sorry, the verse on the throne. And we might see it as a square representation. But if we look further and considering Ibn Arabi's allusions to it as a circular writing, when commenting on circularity, he refers explicitly to this verse, we'll find that in fact the writing inside is progressing, is turning, moving around the center. And then we can easily imagine that there is a circle in which the square is inscribed. I hope you will have the occasion to read through this wonderful ayah, and you will appreciate what Ibn Arabi is suggesting to us, that the whole ayah is in each sentence showing to us a couple of opposites, pairs of elements that would somehow correspond to these two halves of these circles, of this circle in which the square is inscribed. So in these and many other passages of the Quran, we can see this circular underlying representation as an inspiration. And Steve was discussing very much about the connection of the circular representation to the letter Nun in particular, where half is visible, half is invisible, according to Ibn Arabi, and to the correspondence of this circle to the Ain, to the eye, which is also perceived as a circle, as an sphere, and of course to the Ain in the sense of the entities of all created beings and the one single entity as well. So with this circularity in mind, we shall proceed. Let me share my screen. So we saw the compass and the circle. Keep that image in mind. Since the aim of this talk is mainly to share some of the beauty we are contemplating through the study of this most expressive prayer, the blessing prayer of effusion, which is called as Salat al-Faidiyya, from the term faid, meaning effusion. And let us start by quoting the Quran. It is He who initiates and brings back to the beginning, and He is the manifesting coverer, Ghafur, the constantly loving, Wadud. We wanted to start this second presentation with this verse because we found when studying the structure of the prayer that it was a most meaningful, inspiring verse for the structure of it itself. And we appreciate here also a sense of circularity and the fact that according to Ibn Arabi and of course the Akbarian tradition, the name Al-Ghafur, which is normally understood as in connection with forgiveness, has the meaning in Ibn Arabi of veiling, covering. And the additional meaning we can see in many of his writings of this covering signifying a manifesting covering. So the idea that it's by veiling that God displays the process of creation. So creation itself is a veil. Human being is understood to be himself the veil of God. So with this understanding, we can better perceive what is going to follow. And of course, the name Wadud, as the constantly loving, composed by the 4 letters Waw, Dad, repeating as in a resonance of a couplet, evokes the principle itself of creation, that is the divine love. So you can already see that we consider the text of the prayer by Abdullah Bosnavi, a Bosniak Ottoman author, 17th century. And I can already say that it has been attributed to Ibn Arabi in all the copies, all the existing copies, as well as commentaries, but we'll talk on that later. Let's get back to the previous talk by seeing again for a moment this beautiful poem on the letter Nun that Steve already presented, to see some more features into it that introduces the sense of kaleidoscopic contemplation we'll need to understand the nature of the prayer. If you look at the end, we already saw that the final rhyme letters, Ha, the Ha and the Alif, are separated from the rest of the verses. And as everything in Ibn Arabi's writing, this is meaningful. I will start by providing some insights on the relationship of numbers and letters within the poem to understand how this works later on in the prayer. Here we see that the Ha is, which is number 5, is the main letter of the rhyme, called Rawi, and it corresponds to the value of the Nun, which is also 5. If we add the final Alif, then we have 6, and this would correspond to the value of the central letter Waw in the name of the letter Nun. So we have this mirroring effect we already saw in the fact that the Nun starts with a Nun and ends with a Nun. And the Barzakh in between is precisely the letter Waw of value 6, representing the Insan al-Kamil. And in connection to that, we have another approach we can do to it, is the fact that the letter Nun, by its name, equals 16, because Nun plus Waw equals 16. And look at this wonder. And this is a common feature in Ibn Arabi's writings, as it is in the prayer we are going to see. The final rhyme of all verses, the extended rhyme, is not only Ha, but it extends to the 2 previous letters, Waw and Dal. Those 2 letters we see in the name Wadud. So we have Waw, Dal, Ha rhyming in all cases, as in the rhyme would be then Udiha. Okay? And the value of all these letters together is precisely 16. So there is another question. We have 4 mentions of the name of the letter Ain, meaning different things in the poem, but this is connected to the value of the name of the letter Ain, which is 4. But the letter Ain has a primary value of 7, okay? So in what sense the Nun is immediately related to the Ain? In what sense the circle of the Nun is connected to the sphericity and the circle of the Ain. Numerically speaking, the value 16 equals, by the procedure of reducing, 1 plus 6 is 7, and we see the same value of the letter Ain. So numerically, both letters are connected by this value 7. Okay, don't worry, because I will not keep talking of abstract numbers in that way. At least I will try not to make it difficult. We'll see more numbers, but not in this detailed way. And do not worry if you cannot follow this kind of details. The aim is to share a taste of how it works, so that if we have an intuition of it, that's enough.
Thank you, Pablo. Just one thing, is it possible to increase the zoom a little bit of the...
Oh yes, I think so.
Thank you.
Let me try, like that. Okay, thank you, Omar.
Thank you.
So, as a framework, to face the interplay of different languages that we have to face to follow, to penetrate the spirit of the prayer, we may come to this structure of an approach. We could call it an inspired perspectivism, if you allow me the word, an oriented perspectivism. So those would be the main sciences that we need to understand the multifaceted prayer. And in a sense, the hermeneutics would be based on these two main sciences. We know that Ibn Arabi starts the Futuhat by developing them together. Is the science of letters, words, and the science of numbers. So we may establish a couple of triads to understand that they operate in interaction. And the science of letters, of course, considers at first instance the Arabic alphabet, but it is understood to be extensive to all kinds of realities, in as much as the whole universe is conceived as a linguistic expression, as God's speech. So a part of this science, we have paid a lot of attention to the very rich dimension of the lexical interreference within the roots of the words. This is called in Arabic derivation, ishtiqaq, and through this understanding of the original meaning of the roots, we come to realize the symbols and images that underlies the contemplation of meanings within the prayer and the Aquarian texts in general. Of course, a dimension that is always fundamental is intertextuality, especially in the case of Aquarian authors to Quran, of course, Hadith, and all the Sufi legacy, as well as other things. In this respect, we have an enormous depth to the findings of Michel Chodkiewicz, who gave to us his precious legacy of the ocean without the shoreless ocean, or an ocean without shore. There he proved to us, among other writings, he proved to us the intertextuality of Ibn Arabi's writing in general to most works by him with the Quranic surahs and the structure of the Quran itself. So intertextuality as a third complementary dimension of this linguistic dimension of our contemplation. Then on the right, we have this science of numbers. We may understand that numbers include the idea of proportions, and they come together, but they are like two different dimensions. If we have the linguistic side, we have here the mathematical side, so to speak. And together with that, we will have to contemplate permanently the patterns of geometry underlying the writings of the Akbarian authors, in particular Ibn Arabi and Abdullah Bosnavi. We came to realize that our understanding and translation of the text changes completely if we appreciate what is being proposed as an underlying pattern to follow the representation that is meant in the text. Steve has been speaking already of the dot, the circle, sphere, the square, cube, and the relationship of all those symbols to the main central symbol of the Kaaba, containing all those patterns together. Within this science of numbers and proportions, we could evoke the significance in terms of understanding this kind of prayer of cosmological reference as well as metaphysics. Think, for example, of the degrees of being represented in the circle together with the degrees of the letters, etc. An important thing to understand here is that in this kaleidoscopic vision, we can imagine that we may inscribe most regular patterns, let's say all regular patterns, within a circle. So within a circle, we would have a triangle and a square and a pentagon and so on. And so the circle, being an inclusive reality with endless possibilities, will have all these polyhedral figures. And this is particularly relevant in terms of understanding our view of the polyvalent structure the prayer offers to us, as we shall see later. Let's say first something about the meaning and practice of salawat, since the prayer we are studying is inscribed in the context of a tradition of writing salawat, a literary genre that particularly developed since the time in the Western lands of Islam in particular, since the time of Abdelaziz al-Mahdawi, whose prayer of blessing Steve and me edited, and the companion of Ibn Arabi, of course. And in this context of Madianite teaching, we find later on the most wonderful examples that contributed to the diffusion of this gender all around Islam. We might mention the very famous Qasida on the Mantle by Al-Burda, by Al-Busiri, of Shadilite filiation, or the later Dalail al-Khairat, the signs of all goods, by Al-Jazuli, also connected to this particular tariqah. And so we see this of course, all the Akbarian prayers that nevertheless will later on have more diffusion and be spread around in Oriental lands. So the salawat refer to a very well-known tradition which any Muslim daily practices many times, which is based on a Quranic instruction by which people always have to wish salam to others. And when the name of the prophet is mentioned or evoked, the believer would say, Sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So in these two parts of the salat as a blessing and the salam as a greeting, always in respect to the mention of the reality of the prophet. So this extends in many ways, and the term salat, of course, is connected to the daily prayer of every Muslim. This is in a more specific sense of ritual daily prayer. But in the context of this salawat, in homage of the prophet, is particularly referred to that, to the prayer on the Muhammadian primordial reality. Now we see that there are two parts: the salat, that is going to be connected to the upper half of the circle, as we shall see, and the salam more connected to the other half. Of course, a fundamental thing here is to understand that this prayer of effusion as any other Akbarian text of this inspiration, guide us to an understanding of the fact that, according to tradition, this is a demand for God to pray, to perform a blessing prayer. And it is understood that this divine salat is an ongoing, endless prayer that is itself the substance of all creation in existence. So let's consider that in this dialogical relationship of the salat, the servant is being the place in which God's speech, God's prayer over the reality of Muhammad is happening, is taking place. So there is a dimension in which the prayer is meant to be an experience ultimately for those who realize that level of theophanic experience. Now, talking on the prayer itself, we are producing a first critical edition. There was a previous one by Nabhani that has been published all around. And the fact is that the first text on the prayer we find is Abdel Ghani's Nabulusi own commentary on this prayer. There we see that he treats the prayer as the Muhammadian prayer, he calls it, Salat al-Muhammadiyya, attributed to Ibn Arabi. And he mentions explicitly the inspiration of a person from the Rum lands, whether it means Anatolian or from Rumelia, including Bosnia, or whatever, but interesting allusion. This is the very first text we have of the prayer. This is one of the reasons why we start looking for exploring the authorship, because as we see, it moves through, it is quite a late text in manuscripts. So we have a number of important commentaries on the prayer by Mustafa al-Bakri, by Muhammad bin Omar al-Baghdadi, connected to Nabulusi, by Muhammad Nur al-Arabi, by Omar ibn Taha al-Attar. I will not talk much about them, just to mention some of the commentaries, because then we have also a number of Ottoman commentaries and translations. By the way, I shall mention that in our book, we hope to include the special contribution of Mahmoud Erol Kilic, who is today with us, and who is working on a Turkish translation of the text based on his previous work and Ottoman commentaries on the prayer. So as we see, a prayer that spread all around Islam, because also the Maghrebian authors, Al-Qattani, from the family Al-Qattani, have commentaries and a lot of mentions towards this celebrated prayer. On the authorship, we are convinced that this attribution to Ibn Arabi has a traditional significance, but the authorship is, as it is clear to us after reading a lot of text by Bosnabi himself and comparing the terminology, the underlying patterns, the approach, the use of expressions. For us, it is very clear at the moment that the original author of the prayer is Abdullah Bosnabi, one of the great Akbarians, very well known for his superb commentary on Fusus al-Hikam, where we can already find all these connections to the prayer itself, but author as well as a remarkable book called Qurra, in reference to the Qurratul Ayn, to the freshness of the eye, an image that comes in the prayer several times. And there he developed some ideas in a very personal way, and we'll find a resonance of those ideas in the prayer. We have been studying significant numbers of the hermeneutic epistles of Bosnabi, commenting mainly passages and surah and surahs of the Quran. And as those who get interested in it will be able to read, there is quite an evidence of this authorship. I was already introducing the idea of a kaleidoscopic structure, and I would like just to mention that the prayer originally is not numbered, but as we were working into it, we realized that numbers comes from it naturally. So we have numbered couplets that rhyme in pairs, but so the prayer can be considered in terms of sentences, independent, or couplets. We can think of it in terms of sections, and we have 5 sections corresponding to the value of the letter Nun, which is always the inspired image as the circle. This is 4 sections starting by Allahumma and the demand from the part of the servant, plus the last starting by Ya Arhamar Rahimin. So 5 sections. But if we think of parts, we can divide it in the first part corresponding to the first section and the second part including the other 4. We shall see that later. There are other ways to approach the structure as a whole. And so it is quite a complex thing. I will not develop, but it's very rich. And what we feel is that the structure has not to be seen as a single structure, but as a multiple diversified perspective. In terms of letters, for example, the 3 letters that are very meaningful in terms of understanding the prayer are those 3 that whose names are mirroring, in the sense that they start and end by the same letter, and they have in their center the letter Waw, the letter Alif, and the letter Ya. But among them, the most singular one, unique in the alphabet by this property, is the letter Nun, because also the letter in its center is a mirroring letter, the letter Waw, starting and ending by a Waw. Well, so the prayer can also be understood in terms of names and Quranic passages, and all these understandings of the prayer are based on numerical patterns. One of them, by which I started, is the connection of the first section to the name Ghafur, and the second to the name, in the second part is the connection to Ghafur and Wadud, as well as the connection to the famous Quranic phrase, Kun Fayakun. One of the features we find is that the different numerical values of the name of the Prophet Muhammad, whether it is 20, whether it is 92 in major system, perfectly fits the structure, the numerical structure of the prayer, especially this 92 value corresponding to the whole of the sentences of the prayer.
Pablo, just to make a comment that we are already half an hour. You can go on, but just to make you aware of the time.
This was just the introduction.
Okay. So
okay. So let me at least share a little bit of the prayer itself. That was the aim, yes, that we could look together at the beauty of some of its relationship and have a taste of how it reads. In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful. And let's, the first couple will read like that. O God, effuse the permanent gift of linking your blessing prayers and the health-giving security of your peace greetings upon, and after he will start mentioning 40 epithets of the Prophet in 40 sentences, so corresponding to the meme value of 40, the meme of the name of the Prophet himself. As we see on the right, we can see that the prayer starts, I don't know whether you see my cursor, I hope so. The prayer starts with the afid, so with the alif, and with the mention of the faid, of the effusion, the divine effusion. And by mentioning in the first sentence corresponding to what we refer to as the Akdas level, the most holy effusion, with the salat, while the second part corresponding to the lower half of the circle would correspond to the tasliman, to the salam. Now, some features of it, we see that it rhymes in an ending letter of kaf, which is the first letter of kun. As we see in the next couple, that the main letter of rhyme, the rawi, is the nun, corresponding to the second letter of kun, the divine creative order B. So we can also see that I mark in red so that you see the resonance, the salawatika, taslimatika. There is not only always a beautiful ending rhyme in this rhyme prose of the text, but there are also inner rhymings. So inside rhyme, outside rhyme. Now in the second case, we started numbering 1, 2, 3, and you may wonder, okay, but how that? In what sense we have to number? So let's see that in the very first couple, it starts saying, the first of the individuations overflowing from the lordly cloud, and the last of the revelation descending to the human species. Well, the first we find is that this prayer is addressed to, first epithet, awwal at-ta'ayyunat, so the first of the individuations. We see here this rhyme of mufadati with the second couplet, with the second sentence, al-mudafati, and the final rhyme, of course, in ani. And the mention of awwal here indicates first, right, which is connected to our numbering. If we go to the second sentence, it reads, to the second couplet, sorry, the immigrant from the Mecca of God is, and there is not with him a second. To the Medina of he is now as he always is. So, apart of the fact that the two towns are mentioned in resonance, as you see in the inner rhyme, there is this explicit mention of the second, okay? Of course, in the same couplet, awwal and akhir, awwal has, starting by alif, which is 1, has a value of 1, and akhir has a value of 9. So the sum of both also equal 1, and clearly correspond to this Akdas level of the circle and the Muqaddas level of the circle. Okay, so in this second, we have the explicit mention, as you see, of the number 2. On the other hand, the rhymes, as it is the case in the third couplet, they always, the result of the rhyme always equal the number we added to the couplet. So there is this astonishing feature by which always the number of a couplet is reflected in the number of the rhyme, among other numerical correspondences. Now I'm worried because of the time, and perhaps I will just read through these sentences so that you get a taste of it. The recorder of the domains of the 5 presences within his being, and we have recorded everything in a clear leader. And the mercifier of those who ask for the actualizing of the numbered contents of these presences by calling upon his generosity, and we have only sent you as a mercy to the worlds. The dot of the basmala that unites all that is to be and has been, and the dot of the command be that constantly circulates through the circles of created beings. The intimate secret of the hines that permeates joyfully in each thing, and that remains utterly naked and free from everything. So many things to comment on. Look, for example, the couplet number 5 is connected to the huwiya. We know that letter ha of huwiya is precisely number 5. The rhyme is number 5. And let's mention briefly that in couplet number 3, the 5 presences within the being of the Muhammadian primordial reality are mentioned. And this is interesting because there is a tradition of commenting on the 5 presences, starting from Konabi and going on through all the Akbarian authors. But as far as we know, this is the first time in his work, Qurra, Abdullah Bosnavi very precisely comments on these 5 presences in terms of the Muhammadian reality, and in a way that is really connected to the spirit of the prayer. I was very optimistic with the time, and I was going to comment on the nature of the fight, of the effusion. Let me just mention that these 2 fights, Al-Faid al-Aqdas and Al-Faid al-Muqaddas, the most holy and the holy effusion, are will have a numerical value because fight has a value of 180. So in the total, they will make 360, which is precisely the number of degrees of a circle. I even had a quotation by Konabi and some reading to do about this question, but without developing more, let me read to you how the Arabic perfectly matches as a mirroring reality. الفيض الأقدس الذاتي الذي تعينت به الأعيان واستعداداتها والفيض المقدس الصفاتي التي تكونت به الأكوان واستمداداتها. So you see that every single word is mirrored in the other level, in the other half of the circle. The most holy effusion of the essence through which potential realities and their preparedness to receive are individuated, and the holy effusion of the qualities by which created beings and their extension in forms are composed. And finally, let me just mention the last couplet I will quote, where it is a reference to the Quran, of course. Our speech, when we decide a thing, our word to it is be, and so it becomes. We see how the kun and yakun and fayakun are mentioned, and the kun correspond to the first part of the prayer, and the fayakun to the second. In many ways, I have no occasion to mention in detail now. I just read the translation. The precious substance of potential speech, which cannot but involve the movement of a vowel and unvowel rest, and the matter of verbalized expression that arises from the hidden depths of be into the manifest testimony of, and so it becomes. As I started with the reference to the names Ghafur and Wadud, that just to show to you that the first section containing 25 couplets, so 7 as the kun, thus 50 sentences as the nun, corresponds in fact to the value of the name Al-Ghafur, while the second part, composed of 4 sections, corresponds to the name Wadud in a very precise way. We have 6, 4, 6, 4 couplets, and all are related to the inspirational letters we see in the screen. So with this evocation, Ya Ghafur, Ya Wadud, we end the talk, and thank you very much for your attention.